I wasn't social in college. No fraternity, no girlfriend, no involvement in anything. My friends Bryson and Ian were in the same boat. Most weekends we killed time in Bryson's dorm. So when Ian texted our group chat one Friday saying the girl he was talking to knew about a party, we jumped at it. Bryson's brother Chris agreed to be our designated driver. On the way there, Ian started getting anxious. The girl, Callista, had stopped responding to his texts. Then her profile vanished from his phone entirely. We told him had been blocked. The house was massive compared to everything around it. Ian wanted to pre-game before going in, so Chris parked down the street and we drank a few beers outside the car. When we finally walked in, something felt wrong immediately. Every light in the house was on. No ambient party lighting, no darkness. The guests were dressed like they were at a formal dinner, not a college rager. The music was instrumental. No lyrics, no bass drops, just strange ethereal sounds. We drilled Ian for details. He had none. There was alcohol everywhere, so we helped ourselves. People kept staring at us. A group of 3 girls approached and started flirting aggressively, almost scripted. They had a bottle of tequila, and we drank from it without thinking. The 6 of us spent the next while drinking and talking. The girl I was with, I'll call her Tina, had a thin green line drawn on her neck. Short, vivid, like it had been put there with a marker. I almost asked about it but didn't want to be rude. I couldn't stop looking at it. Bryson and his girl went upstairs. Then Ian and his. I told Tina I needed the bathroom. On my way out, a tall man in a white button-down bumped into me and just stood there staring. That's when I noticed it, the same green line, identical in color and size, on his neck. I asked what his problem was. He smirked. "Who invited you?" I blurted out Callista's name. His smile dropped. He repeated it quietly, then gestured around the party. "Do you see Callista here?" I slammed the bathroom door. When I came out, I started looking at necks. 2 more people had the same green mark, then 3, then more. I found Bryson and Ian coming down the stairs and pulled them into an empty hallway. I told them what I'd seen. They laughed. Then I noticed something on Ian's neck, a thin line but red instead of green. Bryson had one too. Ian dismissed it as makeup. Bryson didn't. We headed for the door. A man walked past us slowly, making eye contact with each of us individually. The green line was clearly visible on his neck. We ran. In the car, both Ian and Bryson's phones started blowing up, the girls asking why we left. Neither of them had been anywhere near us when we walked out.
How did they know?
My friends blocked the numbers. Everyone I've told this story to has a different theory about what was happening in that house. I don't have one. I just know I'm glad we got out. I'm a graduate student at Purdue studying civil engineering. A few months into the program, my backpack was stolen from a lecture hall while I was in the bathroom. Wallet, keys, laptop, everything. The hall didn't have cameras. I cancelled my cards, reported the keys, and started looking for a new laptop. Annoying, but manageable. Or so I thought. A few days later, I found a handwritten note slipped under my apartment door. 3 words, "I see you." Whoever stole my backpack had gone through my laptop and found my address. Worse, they had my apartment keys. I checked every room, locked the deadbolt, and tried to breathe normally. More notes followed over the next week. "I know what you did. Watch yourself." Short, handwritten, always under the door. One night I saw a camera flash outside my window. Things in the apartment started getting moved, shoes in the wrong place, my coat draped differently. Then I came home to find my room torn apart. Dresser drawers pulled out, books scattered, bedsheets stripped. I called the police. They documented it. They left. I asked my landlord to change the locks. He said 2 days, minimum. I begged for faster. He shrugged it off and eventually stopped answering altogether. As I write this, I haven't left my apartment in over a day. I'm afraid to go to class because whoever has my laptop probably knows my schedule. My plan is to hide and wait for them to come while I'm supposed to be gone and confront them myself. I don't know what else to do. I go to Temple University and live in a small second-floor apartment near campus. A few days after breaking up with my boyfriend Ben, I started hearing noises outside my window at night, footsteps, quiet shuffling. I assumed it was Ben. He was harmless, genuinely sweet, and I figured he just missed me. I let it go. What I should have been paying attention to was something else entirely. I had a major group project due and I was responsible for editing and submitting the final video to our professor. I worked on it until midnight, emailed it, and went to sleep. The next day in class, the professor pulled up the file. What played was not our project. It was a grainy video of someone in a scream mask saying horrible things about me, my professor, and the government. The professor let it play longer than he should have, probably from shock. When he paused it, the entire room was staring at me. I ran out crying. I waited outside until class ended and went back to explain. 2 files had been sent from my account, the real project first, then the replacement video. My email had been hacked. I changed my password. A week later, I was logged out of Snapchat. Someone else had signed in. I called the police. Ben agreed to be questioned and was cleared. He did, however, admit that after the breakup he had posted some of my personal information on an online forum. He swore he hadn't shared passwords, but mine were easy to guess, and I used the same one for everything. Random profiles started adding me on Snapchat. When I accepted one, they started sending me photos of myself, intimate photos from my phone. I blocked them before they could make demands. For a week straight, new accounts kept appearing. I never accepted another one. The police said there wasn't enough information to act. Whoever this person is, they have my address, my schedule, my photos. They've been outside my apartment. I'm terrified of what happens if they get bored of being ignored. I don't know how this ends. My truck's battery died on a parkway past midnight. I left the hazards on and got out to wave someone down. A car slowed and pulled in behind me. 2 large men stepped out. I asked if they had jumper cables. The driver looked past me at the truck and said no. The other asked if I was stuck. The driver said he'd call one of his boys. Something about them felt wrong immediately. I got back in my truck and called my brother. Woke him up, told him to bring cables and to hurry. When I got out to wave the 2 men off, they didn't leave. 5 minutes passed. Their car was still sitting behind mine. I called my brother again. He was in the car. I told him to floor it and bring something to defend ourselves with. He said he had his baseball bat. More headlights appeared. The approaching car pulled in behind the first. 2 more men got out. The driver from the first car greeted them. None of them had jumper cables. They started walking toward my truck. Then my brother's Mustang came flying down the parkway. He parked in front of my hood, stepped out with a bat, and handed me a second one. One of the men laughed. Another said they didn't want trouble, but the original passenger was missing. My brother whispered to watch out. One of them was gone. He popped his hood and connected the cables. While we waited, he tilted his head toward the woods. The missing man was crouched in the tree line, watching, positioned for a surprise attack. My brother told me to try the ignition. The engine caught. We whispered a plan. He'd throw it in reverse. I'd floor it onto the road. We closed the hoods, took one last look at the men huddled by the third car, and ran for our vehicles. A brick came through my rear windshield as I pulled away. Then gunshots. The rest of the glass shattered. I ducked as low as I could while keeping my eyes on the road. We made it home. Our father said Wed had an encounter with a local gang and told us never to take that parkway at night again. I was solo camping in the wilderness, lying in my sleeping bag as the campfire died down. Footsteps started circling my tent. Not heavy enough for a bear, lighter, more deliberate. I called out. No answer. I unzipped the tent and looked. The footsteps became cautious. Then a light appeared in the darkness, brief, unmistakable. A phone screen, switching off as quickly as it had appeared. Someone was circling my camp. I'd already called out and gotten no response, which ruled out any friendly scenario. I retrieved my sidearm from my bag and started packing as fast as I could, turning every few seconds to check for movement. The footsteps kept going the entire time. I sprinted to my car with my gear, locked the doors, and started the engine. The car shook. A low tire alert came on, all 4 tires. Every single one had been slashed. I sat in the dark, hands shaking, headlights the only light source. I reached for my phone and caught movement in the mirror. Someone was standing at the trunk of my car. I grabbed the handgun, opened my door with all the aggression I could summon, and aimed. The figure raised his hands. I screamed at him to get away from my car. He backed into the woods and disappeared. I called the police and a tow truck and didn't lower that weapon until a state trooper's lights pulled into the lot. My old Buick had a broken gas gauge. The needle decided when it wanted to work. One night after a vacation, I forgot how long it had been since my last fill-up. The car died on a quiet road in a quiet town. I didn't want to bother my girlfriend, so I got out and looked around. The only option was a small house on a hill to the right of my car. I rang the bell at 9:30. Lights were on inside. No answer. I rang once more, waited, and walked away. As I headed down the driveway, I heard something from the side of the house, moaning, distressed breathing like someone in pain. It came from behind a row of bushes. I didn't feel right snooping and kept walking. When I glanced back at the house, a light was on upstairs that hadn't been on before, and someone was standing at the window, just a head and shoulders, motionless, watching me. I stared for a moment. They didn't move. I went back to my car. I called roadside assistance, half an hour for a gas delivery. While I waited, a deep voice said, "Excuse me," from the direction of the house. A man was standing by the curb near his driveway, hat pulled low, face hidden. He asked if there was a problem. I told him I ran out of gas. He said, "Oh," and walked back up the hill, disappearing behind the bushes. My girlfriend texted me to go see what the sounds were. Against my better judgment, I crept through the trees up the side of the house to the window where the moaning was coming from. The blind was down. I tapped on the glass and asked if everything was all right. A faint, weak voice said, "Help." Then the blind kinked open and a face was staring back at me through the glass. It looked like the man from outside. The blind dropped back down. The window slammed shut. I ran to my car and locked the doors. When the roadside truck arrived and filled my tank, I didn't say a word about what he'd heard or seen. I just drove home and tried to forget that house existed. Sean Greats operated in northern Ohio between 2006 and 2016, murdering women after assaulting them. He is now on death row, and the reason he was caught was the extraordinary courage of one woman who refused to become his next victim. On September 13, 2016, Ashland police received a 911 call from an unknown woman, later referred to as Jane Doe, who whispered that she had been kidnapped and was tied up mere feet from her sleeping abductor. She described the house as best she could: yellow, near the 4th Street laundromat, abandoned. She said the man had broken into it to use as a holding location. She confirmed she was injured, that the man had a weapon, and that she had been taken from her own apartment after knowing him for about 6 weeks. When the dispatcher asked if she could escape, she said she'd managed to partially free herself but was terrified of waking him. He had rigged the bedroom door to make noise if it opened. While the dispatcher continued walking her through her options, Jane accidentally knocked over her captor's taser. The line went dead briefly. At that point, police knew they had minutes, possibly seconds, before she became the next in a series of women who had already died at this man's hands. Greats had a long history of violence that escalated steadily across years. At 18, he was arrested for choking a girlfriend. A few years later, he broke into an ex-girlfriend's home and choked her again. 8 months after that, he returned to the same house and hid under her couch with a butcher knife. Despite this, his superficial charm allowed him to maintain relationships. He fathered 3 children with 3 different women. His ex-wife later recalled him saying that if he couldn't see his daughter, no one would. His first confirmed murder victim was Rebecca Lisi, a sex worker whose body was found in March 2015. Her death was initially ruled an overdose. His second victim, Candace Cunningham, had been living with him in Mansfield before she disappeared. Her body wasn't recovered until the day of Greats' arrest, when he led police to it behind a burned-down house. Jane was to be his final victim. He had lured her from her apartment, confined her in the abandoned house, and subjected her to days of torture while she was bound. He barely slept the first night, giving her no chance to escape. But after another day of violence, he finally passed out. His phone sat beside him, notifications going off, and he didn't stir. Jane reached across his sleeping body, took the phone, and dialed 911. Police arrived just in time. Inside the house, they found more bodies than they'd expected, decomposing remains of previous victims stored in the same building where Greats had been holding Jane. The 911 dispatcher received significant public criticism for her volume and the number of questions she asked during the call, which many believed could have woken the captor. But in the end, the call worked. Jane survived. And a man who would not have stopped was taken off the streets permanently. On September 21, 2009, millionaire real estate developer James Bob Ward called 911 from his home on Isleworth Country Club Drive in Windermere, Flourish, and reported that he had just shot his wife. His tone throughout the call was strikingly calm, almost conversational, given the nature of what he was describing. When the dispatcher asked where the weapon was, he said it was in a container beside the bed. When asked if his wife was breathing, he said she was dead. When asked if the shooting was intentional, he said it was an accident, that his wife Diane, who he described as depressed and intoxicated, had been holding his Magnum handgun and it discharged while he was trying to take it from her. Bob was charged with second-degree murder. Prosecutors alleged the couple had been arguing about the collapse of his real estate empire during the recession and that the argument had turned fatal. The defense painted Diane as suicidal and unstable, a woman who had struggled with alcohol and prescription drugs, who had become publicly volatile, and who had directed her anger at her husband over the family's declining fortunes. Their daughters, Sarah and Mallory, testified that their father had been their mother's emotional punching bag for years. In 2018, a potential piece of evidence surfaced. An estate sales professional working in the couple's Atlanta home found a pink notebook on a shelf in the master bedroom closet. Inside was a handwritten note, "Dear Mallory and Sarah, please know how much I love you. I don't know how it happened for me to end up like this. I want you to have wonderful lives and know that I will always be watching out for both of you. Take care of Daddy. I love you more than you will ever know. Take care of the dogs. They will need you." A former FBI handwriting expert examined the note and reportedly concluded the handwriting was consistent with Diane's. If legitimate, it would support Bob's version of events, that his wife had been suicidal and the shooting was an accident. But the question that continues to haunt the case is Bob's demeanor. His tone on the 911 call, during the police interrogation and throughout the legal proceedings, was flat, detached, almost bored. If this had truly been an accident, if he had just watched his wife of 26 years die by his own hand, the absence of any visible grief was, for many people, impossible to reconcile with innocence. He remains in prison today. For decades, a 911 call circulated online under various titles, most commonly, "Old Woman Murdered During 911 Call." The recording featured an elderly woman named Ruth Price who called to report a man knocking on her door, claiming to be looking for an apartment. Partway through the call, a blood-curdling scream erupted, and Ruth said she couldn't breathe. For years, the prevailing assumption was that she had been killed during the call. Many people believed it was a hoax or a staged recording used for 911 operator training. Recently, new information confirmed the call was real. Ruth Mildred Starr was born in Pueblo, Colorado, on December 7, 1913. A newspaper clipping from the San Diego Evening Tribune dated 1980 reported that a woman named Ruth M.R. Price was assaulted on the 3800 block of 35th Street, matching the address she began to give on the call before being interrupted by the dispatcher. But the most significant discovery was Ruth's obituary. She died in 1994, 14 years after the assault. Ruth had not been murdered during that call. She had fought off her attacker and survived. The screaming on the recording, as horrifying as it was the sound of a woman defending herself against someone who intended to kill her and failing to do so. The call was likely repurposed as a training tool precisely because of how visceral and disturbing it was, which is how the myth of her death was born. The true ending of Ruth Price's story is considerably better than the one the internet told for decades. I'm a mother of 3, 10, 7, and 3. I go grocery shopping at least twice a week, usually at the King Cullen near our house. One evening I was running late and went much later than usual, arriving after 9 with the store closing at 10. For once, my husband was home to watch the kids, so I was shopping alone, a genuine luxury. The store was nearly empty. I was moving fast through the aisles with my list and coupons when someone tapped my shoulder. I turned to find a tan man about my height in a baseball cap, black goatee, red zip-up hoodie, and jeans. He apologized for startling me and said, I had been looking everywhere for a specific bag of chips that happened to be in my cart. He asked where I found them. I led him to the aisle. He thanked me and I turned to go. But he started talking, the ingredients, the flavor, anything to keep the conversation going. I kept inching toward my cart. He told me I was pretty. I thanked him and said I needed to finish before they closed. He followed me. For the remainder of my shopping trip, every time I looked down an aisle, he was passing by, slowing down, stopping, watching. At checkout, he got in line behind me with 2 or 3 items. I felt his stare through the back of my head. When I left, he called out to wish me a good night. I didn't respond. In the parking lot, I watched him walk to his car, a beat-up Honda, and sit in it without starting the engine. I drove home and pulled into the driveway. That's when I looked to my left and saw a car with its headlights off, creeping slowly down my street. It pulled to the curb a few houses down. I went inside and called my husband. He ran outside, but the car was already gone. The following weekend, late at night, we heard shuffling outside the house. My husband opened the side window and saw someone trying to open the backyard gate. The man looked up and ran. My husband grabbed a baseball bat and chased the car as it sped away, the same Honda. The police came, took my description, and told us they patrolled the area. The incident stopped after that. But knowing that man knows where I live has never fully left me. I worked at Woolbounds during college, a 24-hour supermarket that occasionally stuck me on the overnight shift. One Tuesday night, I arrived at midnight. Half the lights were off to save electricity. By 2 in the morning, the store was dead. A bald man who looked like he could be a manager, keyring on his khakis, small backpack in hand, approached me and asked if it was my first night shift. He introduced himself and told me to go to the back warehouse and organize the pallets. He said he watched the front. As I walked toward the back, I saw him doing something to the entrance door, reaching for a switch on the side lid. In the warehouse, I met Rob, the actual night manager, wearing a Woolbounds vest. When I described the bald man, Rob looked confused. He was the only manager on duty. Before we could investigate, every light in the store went out. Rob told me to stay in the warehouse while he checked. I sat on a box in the dark, texting friends, when I heard a door open on the other side of the warehouse. Slow, deliberate footsteps approached, followed by a voice, "Hey kid, you in here?" It wasn't Rob. It was the bald man. I ran to the front of the store looking for Rob. He was gone. I grabbed my jacket and tried the exit. It was locked. The bald man had locked it from the inside. I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around. It was Rob who had come from another direction. He flipped something on the top of the doorframe, unlocked it, and whispered at me to get outside. We both left the building. Rob called the police, telling them an armed man had locked himself inside the store. I told him to relay that the man had been trying to lure me to the warehouse. 4 police cars arrived within 10 minutes. I sat in my car and watched them enter the building. When I went to my next shift, my supervisor told me what the security footage showed. The bald man circling the store, checking if anyone was watching, then cutting the lights and heading straight for the warehouse where Head told me to go. If Rob hadn't found me when he did, I don't know what would have happened in that back room. I worked the night restock shift at a rural supermarket called Great American, 10 at night to 3 in the morning, restocking shelves with a 2-person team. I had the store keys. That night I was scheduled with Terry. I let myself in through the back, started working, and realized after half an hour that Terry still hadn't shown up. I went to the back room. His things weren't there. The back door was shut. I had propped it open with a door stopper for him. The stopper was now on the outside. I called Terry. He picked up sounding like he was in bed. He was sick, wasn't coming in. Nobody had told me. The chill started immediately. Someone had closed that door and moved the stopper. I did a quick sweep of the back area. Nobody visible. I returned to stocking bread on the far side of the floor when a loud sound echoed from across the store. I looked down the long center aisle. On the opposite end, in the dairy section, a man dressed in black walked past the gap between aisles and looked directly at me. The comparison that came to mind was that scene from Signs, the alien walking past the birthday party video. That specific kind of wrong. I walked toward him, calling out. He moved through the aisles ahead of me, always one step ahead, always just disappearing around a corner. I caught up to him in one aisle. He was standing at the far end, fully facing me, mouth hanging open. He started waving me over without speaking. His face was deeply unsettling in a way I couldn't fully articulate. I said, "Who are you?" He disappeared behind the shelf. I went to my car and called my boss, who told me to either get the man out or call the police. I called 911. An officer arrived and we walked the store together. We found the man standing in an aisle as if waiting for us. When the officer ordered him to come, he obeyed. In handcuffs, he kept smiling at me, licking his lips non-stop. The only words he spoke were to the officer. He said he was looking for a snack. The way he looked at me as they walked him out, that menacing, deliberate smile, is something I've never been able to shake. I never left a door open at that store again. When I was 9, I lived with my mother and little sister in a small house on a quiet street. My mother said old houses make noises, but not all the noises in that house sounded like settling wood or shifting pipes. Some of them sounded like something else entirely. It started with shadows. One night, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars on my ceiling, I noticed a shape low in the corner of my room near the toy chest. It wasn't moving with the tree branches outside. It was still. I blinked, and it was gone. Cold moved through me, not from the air, from inside my body. In the morning, the toy chest was standing open. I never left it open. Weeks later, my 5-year-old sister told our mother she didn't like the man in her closet. She said it so casually it stopped me cold. My mother brushed it off. My sister said the man stood in the closet at night and whispered, but she couldn't make out the words. That night, my mother said a prayer with her and tucked her in. She didn't check the closet. I woke that night to the sound of something dragging across my floor, slow, deliberate, like fingernails on wood. The sound stopped right beside my bed. I didn't look down. I couldn't. In the morning, there were long scratches in the floor next to my bed, fresh, deep, carved into the wood. My mother got angry when I showed her. She said I'd been playing with something sharp. I hadn't. After that, the nights worsened. Faint whispers from inside the closet, like a radio on low volume. My sister would cry in her room, pointing at the corner, "Hez there, hez there." I never saw him, but I felt him. The scariest night was in winter. I woke and my bedroom door was open. The hallway light went out. Footsteps came down the hall and stopped outside my door. It creaked open, and a tall, dark shape pushed its head into the room. I shut my eyes and didn't move. When I opened them, the door was closed. Years later, after we had moved, I asked my mother if she had ever experienced anything in that house. She hesitated, then said yes. She said she would sometimes wake to a shadow standing in her doorway. She had never told us because she didn't want to scare us. She believed something was wrong with that house. She thought it was a man, someone who had lived there before us. When I was 10, my family moved into a bigger house because my mother had just remarried. My bedroom was at the end of the hall with 2 big windows facing the backyard and a closet deeper than any I had before. The first night, I woke to soft shuffling from inside the closet, like clothes being brushed against. Then the door shivered, as though someone had pressed against it from the inside. Within days, tapping started on the window glass. No branches were close enough to reach it. The tapping would go on for minutes, stopping only when I pulled the blanket over my head. One night I peeked and saw a pale hand pressed flat against the outside of the glass. I screamed. My parents came running and found nothing. No handprints, no marks. Then my younger brother started mentioning a white lady. He said she watched him from the corner of his room. One night I woke to see her standing at the foot of my bed. She was taller than anyone I had ever seen. Her head nearly brushed the ceiling. Long white dress that moved without wind. Black, stringy hair. A face pale as chalk with eyes like empty holes. I tried to scream and couldn't. I shut my eyes, and when I opened them, she was gone. But the closet door was wide open. The worst night came during a storm. I watched the window lock turn by itself. The window slid open. She climbed in, not walking, floating, feet never touching the floor. She drifted to my bed and leaned down until her face was inches from mine. Cold breath on my skin. She whispered my name. I screamed. My parents rushed in and found the window closed and locked. Nobody there. I blacked out the moment between seeing her approach and hearing myself scream. My parents believed it was a night terror. They took me to therapy. We lived there 3 more years. My brother stopped talking about the white lady, but I'd hear him crying at night, saying, "Go away." I think he was too scared to mention her again, not because Shed stopped, but because he didn't want to end up in therapy too. When I was 8, I rode my bike every day after school. Down the block from our house, an older man stood at the end of his long driveway most afternoons. He wore a hat, and he would call out and wave whenever I rode past. He never stepped off his property. Our conversations were short: school, my bike, a joke about a cat that made me laugh. He seemed to know things about me. I never told him that I had a little brother, that my dad got a new car. One week, he stopped coming out. The curtains in the front window were closed. Days later, I saw a woman in the backyard watering flowers, someone I'd never seen before. I crossed the street for the first time and went to the back gate. She heard me and came over. I told her about the man in the driveway, how he used to say hi when I rode by, how he knew my name. She said the man I described sounded like her husband. I smiled, expecting her to say he was inside or on a trip. She didn't smile back. She said he had died the year before, in his chair. His name was Harold. She brought out a photograph, same hat, same broad smile. Then she mentioned a scar, a thin, pale line from ear to mouth that headed since childhood. I looked at the photo closely and saw it. But the man on the driveway had no scar. His face was smooth and round and plain. I rode home slowly. That night I couldn't sleep. Weeks later, I woke to the sound of my name being called from outside my window. The voice was familiar. My mother checked and found no one there. My father walked the yard with a flashlight. They said he'd dreamed it. Years passed. I never went back to that driveway. The house changed hands. New cars filled the long slope of concrete. I got older and learned other routes, but the memory of that man sits like a small stone in my chest. I drove down the block a few years ago just to see it. A child was riding a bike near the corner. The driveway was empty. I wanted to stop and ask if anyone had ever stood there and waved. I didn't. When my grandparents passed away, my parents let me live in their house instead of selling it. I adopted a 2-year-old German shepherd named Rocky shortly after moving in. One night not long after I got him, Rocky's barking woke me from a dead sleep. He was in the hallway, clawing frantically at the basement door. I opened it just enough for Rocky to shove his nose through and bolt down the stairs. I followed with the light on. He was standing motionless in front of a closet door in a far corner, tail between his legs, staring up at it. Whatever confidence had driven him downstairs was gone. He looked at me as if asking me to handle it. I didn't open the closet. Instead, I took Rocky by the collar and walked us both back upstairs. I shut the basement door and went to the kitchen to call my father. Midway through explaining the situation, I noticed the basement door was open again. I set the phone down. Footsteps, loud, clear, moving toward the front door. I ran to my bedroom and told my dad to call the police. By the time they arrived, whoever had been in the house was gone. A large amount of cash I kept near the basement bar was missing. The basement window was wide open. A break-in. Someone had been in my basement in that closet while I was sleeping upstairs. Rocky knew before I did. I was home alone on a Friday night, playing Fortnite in the basement with headphones on. Even over the game audio, I heard a thump behind me. I took the headphones off and scanned the cluttered back section of the basement. Nothing visible. I kept playing, but I couldn't concentrate. I took the headphones off permanently and played in silence. A metallic clank echoed from the back of the room, sharp, ringing, deliberate. I turned off the system. I walked slowly toward the large metal air vent in the corner. Something moved inside it. A hand reached through the grate and started waving me closer. A deep, raspy voice said, "Come here, I need help." I didn't run at first, I just backed up, staring. Then the hand started shaking the vent aggressively, trying to break it open. I screamed that I was calling the cops and ran upstairs. The 911 operator told me to get into a room with a weapon, lock the door, and hide. From behind that door, I heard a crash from the basement, a door being kicked open, followed by screaming. A man's voice, unhinged, shouting, "Where are you and I'm gonna kill you?" He was up the stairs in seconds, trying the doorknob, pounding on the door hard enough that I could see it flexing inward. I climbed out the window and dropped into the bushes below. A police car pulled up as I hit the ground. The officers went in and brought the man out in handcuffs minutes later. As they put him in the car, he stared at me through the window, a look of pure, focused hatred I still see when I close my eyes. This last one is a series of blurry memories from childhood. My brother and I spent most of our time in our old house's basement, where our dad kept his hockey table, pool table, and Super Nintendo. One afternoon during a racing game, the dryer door slammed shut in the adjacent laundry room. We called for our mum, assuming she'd been in there. The room was dark and empty. We ran upstairs screaming. Nobody had been down there. Months later, I was walking past the basement door late at night and heard the television click on downstairs, that distinct sound of an old box TV powering up. I called out for my parents and brother. No answer. My dad went down to turn it off and told me it was a glitchy TV. The final occurrence was the worst. A few days before we were set to move to our new house, my brother and I were playing video games downstairs. A red ball bounced across the floor behind the couch. Then the boiler room door slowly swung shut as we watched. We ran upstairs. Our parents went down. When they came back up, they were strangely quiet. They told us to stay in our rooms. A police car arrived. They wouldn't tell us what happened until after we had moved. My father tried to open the boiler room door. Something was holding it shut from the other side, or pulling it shut. Even years later, telling us the story, I could hear the fear in his voice. I don't believe in ghosts, but I still don't know what was happening in that basement. Tracy recognized everyone in her little brother's drawing of the family dinner table, her parents, the family dog, the cat. What she couldn't identify was the fifth person, a man sitting on the floor, partially hidden behind the table, drawn wearing all black with reddish-brown curly hair. When she asked her 6-year-old brother who the man was, he shrugged and said he wasn't allowed to tell. She showed the drawing to her parents, suggesting the boy had an imaginary friend or was playing a game. When they asked him directly at dinner, his answer was the same, a shrug, a pouting face, him not allowed to tell. The father wasn't concerned. A 6-year-old can draw anything and build a story around it. Tracy was often left in charge of her brother when their parents were out. One afternoon, she heard him talking in his room. When she checked, he was playing alone with his toy cars on the floor. She noticed something else, green apple candies scattered around the room, a brand her mother had never bought. It was summer, so school wasn't a source either. When she took them, the boy screamed for them back. When their parents returned and asked where the candies came from, he refused to answer. He was grounded to his room until he talked. That night, Tracy sat near her bedroom door listening. When her brother began speaking past his bedtime, she opened the door and saw him standing at his open window, talking to a man who appeared to be climbing in. She screamed for her parents. The man fled. The boy started crying. When police arrived, he finally talked. His friend had told him not to tell anyone or he wouldn't be able to come play anymore. The man would bring snacks and candy, and they would play with toys together. They had met in front of the house when the man stopped on his bicycle and offered him candy. After that, the boy had told the man which window was his. The drawing of the family dinner hadn't been imaginary at all. The man under the table had been real. A mother of 2 submitted this one, a 6-year-old boy and an 8-year-old girl. The boy had been waking his parents in the middle of the night, claiming something was standing at the foot of his bed, watching him. The first few times, the parents checked his room to reassure him. The closet door was always open when it was supposed to be closed. When they asked why, the boy said it was because the thing in the closet was telling the truth. Each time they showed him the empty closet, he'd go back to sleep. For a while, they let him sleep on the floor of their room with a blanket. Eventually, the parents decided to take a different approach. They asked the boy to draw what the thing at the foot of his bed looked like. The drawing sent a chill through both of them. A tall, contorted figure, something resembling the kind of creature from a horror film, the type that would unsettle a grown adult, let alone a child of 6. There was also something drawn at the window. When asked, the boy said the thing appeared there too sometimes, when it wasn't at the foot of his bed. The parents moved him to the spare bedroom across the hall, one without a large closet. His mother admitted she got a little more unsettled each time the boy came crying to their room in the dark. The 8-year-old daughter never reported seeing anything. The babysitter found it on the floor of the boy's room while he was in the basement playing video games. Her name was Alyssa, and the boy's name was Rock. Oh. He was 11 years old, living in Ottawa. His parents were away for a week, and Alyssa had been hired to stay with him. Rock was quiet and kept to himself. He stayed in his room most of the day, only emerging for food or to play games downstairs. Alyssa tried to befriend him the first day and gave up when it became clear he was either hostile toward her or simply a profoundly unfriendly child. She noted the toy guns scattered everywhere, Nerf guns, airsoft guns, various others, all over the house. One night she woke to find Rock standing silently in the doorway of her bedroom. When she sat up and asked if something was wrong, he closed the door quickly and ran back to his room. The next day, while he was in the basement, she went into his room for the first time. Papers were spread across the floor. One was a drawing of a handgun. Next to it, she found several pages stapled together, a small booklet. The cover page was titled, "The Babysitter." She photographed each page and left the room before he could return. Page 2 showed a drawing of Alyssa sitting on the couch while Rock watched through a doorway. The text read, "Therese, something about her that I hate. I think it's how ugly she is. I think I'm going to have to kill her." Page 3 showed Rock reaching for a kitchen knife while Alyssa stood at the fridge. The final page referenced the night Head appeared in her doorway. "She caught me sneaking into her room. I have to be quieter next time." The drawing showed Rock standing over Alyssa's sleeping body with a knife behind his back. Alyssa returned to his room. On the nightstand beside his bed, a small kitchen knife. She photographed everything, sent it to his parents, and called them. They initially tried to dismiss it as a joke. They were quickly convinced otherwise. His grandmother took over that same day. Alyssa accepted her payment and left without contacting authorities, but not without insisting the parents get the boy professional help. A 6-year-old boy named Jake loved to draw. One of his earliest pictures showed himself standing in front of his house, grass, trees, cars passing on the street, his mother at the window. Innocent enough. But a later drawing, done weeks after the first, contained the same scene with one addition. An identical car parked on the street with a figure sitting inside. Jake appeared to be waving at the person. When his parents asked about the car, Jake said it was one he always saw out front. The man inside would smile and wave at him whenever they made eye contact. Over the following days, Jake's parents watched for the vehicle. It wasn't there. Then, one afternoon, while Jake was playing outside, they ran out and caught a glimpse of a silver Buick speeding away down the block. Jake confirmed it was the car. None of the neighbors recognized it. Jake wasn't allowed outside without his parents for a while. When the car didn't reappear, the restriction was lifted. Then one day, Jake came inside and said the man in the car had tried to get him to come over. His father ran outside, but the car was already at the end of the block. One night, taking the garbage out, Jake's father spotted the Buick parked across the street. He pulled out his phone and tried to get close enough for a plate number, but the car turned on and drove off before he could. The vehicle was never seen again after that night, but it had been parked outside at all hours, including late at night, when a 6-year-old would have no reason to be outside. Whatever that man's intentions were, he had been watching the house, not just the boy. Jake's father went door to door asking for camera footage. Nobody had captured a clear plate number. The video he had was given to police. Without a plate, there was nothing more they could do. Jeremy has 3 sons. His mother, Claire, frequently stays over to spend time with her grandchildren. She's strict, the way her own upbringing taught her to be, and that strictness extends to the grandchildren. The middle son, Tom, age 7, is the one who pushes back the hardest. One day, while Jeremy and his wife were out, Tom hit his younger brother over the last ice cream bar. Claire smacked him and sent him to his room for the rest of the day. He threw a tantrum, objects hitting walls, screaming. Eventually, he went quiet. When Claire tried to enforce the punishment later, she had to get physical with him again to keep him in the room. It was during that period that Tom drew the picture. When Jeremy and his wife came home ready to scold their son, they found him sitting on the floor smiling, surrounded by drawings and scattered crayons. He handed them one picture. In it, Tom had drawn himself in the act of hanging his grandmother from a rope. His parents stood nearby in the drawing, all 3 of them smiling. Each figure was labeled by name. The drawing was explicit enough in its intent that no interpretation was required. Tom was grounded. The next morning at breakfast, he looked at his grandmother and told her he hated her and was going to kill her. He said it with a smile. Claire's reaction was shock more than anger. Tom was sent back to his room and began attending therapy shortly afterward. For the first few sessions, he refused to speak. Over time, he opened up enough to tell the therapist that he wanted to hurt his brothers for the things they did, and that he hated his grandmother and his 2nd-grade teacher. His parents continued to take things day by day. Cody found the drawings on his younger brother John's laptop. John was 13 at the time. Quiet, reclusive, picked on at school, no real friends. He spent every afternoon and weekend playing computer games alone in his room. Teachers were concerned about his lack of effort and his extreme silence, asking whether everything was all right at home. One day, while John was out, Cody went through his notebook and found not class notes but violent doodles, stick figures fighting, shooting each other with bows and guns. Then Cody figured out John's password and opened his laptop. In the pictures folder, He found folders of crude cartoons drawn in MS Paint. One series told a story. John's character had been missing from school. When the teacher, drawn and named after one of John's actual teachers, asked the class where he had been, John arrived carrying a shotgun and wearing a combat helmet. He threatened to kill his classmates and then the teacher. Frame by frame, the cartoon showed him shooting everyone in the room. The last image showed John's character smiling and saying, "On to the next classroom." Cody confronted his brother instead of telling their parents. John deleted his YouTube channel and was furious, but he never told their parents what Cody had found because he knew Cody had seen worse things on the laptop as well. When Cody asked directly whether John had ever thought about doing what the cartoon depicted, John said absolutely not. It was just for views. Cody has tried to help his brother, who continues to isolate himself. He still considers telling their parents. In situations like this, the images may only be drawings, but they may also be something else entirely. It was one of the only streets in the area with functioning streetlights. Everything was closed at that hour, and nothing was happening, which was normal for 3 in the morning. I turned left onto Warren Street and drove slowly, scanning both sides of the road, checking the parking lots the way I always did on patrol. That's when something caught my eye as I passed the coffee shop lot. I hit the brakes and reversed. The lights inside the shop were on. This place closed at 6 every weekday. I knew because I was a regular, and I knew the owner personally. I pulled to the curb and tried the front door. It was unlocked. I pushed the heavy glass open and called the owner's name into the empty room. My voice echoed against the tile and the counter and came back to me with nothing behind it. The silence at that hour, in a space meant to be full of people, had a physical weight to it. I kept calling until I heard a sound from below, somewhere underneath the shop. I hadn't known there was a basement until that moment. Behind a narrow door, concrete stairs descended into total darkness. I unholstered my flashlight and aimed it downward. Every instinct in my body told me to wait for backup. But I went down. At the bottom, the beam cut a narrow line through black air. Then the sound came again, louder now, closer. It was difficult to describe, part electronic, part organic, as if a machine and a human throat were producing it simultaneously. It came from a back room. I stepped inside what appeared to be a small office and stood still, waiting. 30 seconds passed. The sound erupted again from the corner, from inside an air vent. I tried shining the light through the grill, but the metal slats blocked it. I pressed my ear against the vent, breathing, unmistakable. Someone was in there. I angled the flashlight differently and pressed one eye to the grill. The beam caught something reflective, an eye, 4 inches from my face, staring back at me through the metal. I drew my weapon and ordered whoever was inside to come out. The vent grill was screwed shut. The sound moved away through the ductwork and faded to nothing. I called for backup. We searched the entire building with the owner, who came in at 4 in the morning. No broken windows, no unscrewed vents, no sign of entry or exit. Whoever had been inside that ventilation system was gone. The questions remain unanswered: how they got in, what that sound was, and how they disappeared without leaving a trace. I worked the night shift at a 24-hour gas station off a rural highway in Ohio, 8 to 4. The first few hours were always busy: road trippers, coffee runs, fill-ups. By 1 or 2 in the morning, the place was dead. I'd play games on my phone, do coursework, or watch shows on my laptop. That night, I was catching up on a series when headlights swept through the window. A car pulled up to one of the pumps and turned off its engine and lights. No one got out. I went back to my show. Minutes passed. The car was still there, but nobody had come in to pay or gone outside to pump. It sat motionless at the pump. Then a car door shut. A man was standing by the vehicle. At first, he appeared to be looking down, but when I squinted, I realized he was looking directly at me through the window. He came to the door. The bell chimed as he walked past the counter without a glance, just the faintest side eye, one eye visible for a fraction of a second under his hood. He went to the back of the store near the snacks and disappeared from view. I couldn't see or hear him. I called out, asking if he needed help. Silence. He emerged from the aisle and walked slowly back toward the exit. He didn't look at me. One hand went into his pocket. The other hand started waving, not a greeting, more like a signal. I saw what looked like the handle of a blade in the pocket hand. I ran from behind the counter and locked the front door with 3 seconds to spare. He pulled the handle. Through the glass, we looked at each other for the first time. I shut the blinds and told him we were closed. Then the knocking started. It escalated to banging. I screamed that I was calling the cops. The banging stopped. I didn't check. I stayed behind the counter for 10 minutes before lifting the blinds. His car was still there. No sign of him anywhere. Another customer pulled in and came to the door. I let him in, told him to be careful of the other vehicle, and we talked for a while. During the conversation, the car finally turned on and drove away. When my replacement arrived at 4, I wasn't laughing anymore. I shook the entire drive home. My second job was delivering Chinese food from a local corner place in 2008. Busy Thursday night, half hour before closing. My boss handed me a delivery to an address 5 miles away, a longer trip, but those always tipped better. The order was just wonton soup and rice. When I pulled up to the house, the neighborhood wasn't great. Before stepping onto the curb, I looked up at the second-floor window. Half a face was watching me. Just the eyes and the bridge of a nose, as if the person was trying to stay hidden. It was a grown man, not a child. A note on the front door read, "Doorbell broken, asleep, door unlocked, money on table. Please come inside and leave food on table." I took a picture of the note. I stepped back and looked at the window again. The person was gone. They weren't asleep. Why leave a note like this? I turned the knob. The door was unlocked. No light inside. I couldn't locate the table the note mentioned. I tried going left into what I guessed was the kitchen based on the sound of a refrigerator. In the dark, I finally thought to use my phone screen as a light. A silhouette was standing in the corner of the kitchen. No features visible, just the dark outline of a person. I dropped the bag of food on the floor and walked straight out the front door without looking back. My boss was angry, as always, but I didn't care. I did one more delivery that night and went home. I couldn't sleep, thinking about what would have happened if I'd actually walked up to that table. I drive for Uber Eats at night to make extra money. A Saturday night request came in at 1 in the morning, 2 hamburgers from McDonald's for a guy named Kyle. His house was at the end of a dead-end street that branched off another dead-end street, right against a tree line along an otherwise deserted highway. I called his number. 1 ring, voicemail. He texted me to come to the door. A bald man in his 30s opened up. Bad breath, visibly drunk. The payment was through the app, but he asked me to come inside and put the food on the kitchen table while he went to get a tip from downstairs. The kitchen was lit by a single outlet nightlight. The smell was significant. Something rotten, chemical, wrong. He was taking too long in the basement. I drifted into the living room, where the TV cast the only light and the stench was worse. The back door was halfway open. I stepped outside onto the deck. The motion sensor light snapped on. 2 large black garbage bags were stacked near the door, each stuffed with something long and heavy. The smell was overwhelming. Flies. A swarm of them concentrated around the bags. The shape of what was inside became unmistakable after a few seconds of looking. I went back through the house toward the front door. Kyle emerged from the basement waving a few singles. He saw me reaching for the doorknob. Then he looked past me toward the back deck, where the light was still on. His smile disappeared. I told him I had to check something in my car. He stared at me without speaking. I opened the door and walked out. He grabbed my shoulder on the stoop. I pulled free and ran. He went back inside. Through my rearview mirror, I watched him come back out holding a metal rod, sprinting toward my car. I called 911 as I drove down the block. 2 police cars arrived within minutes. Kyle had already started moving the bags toward the bushes in the backyard. The bags contained exactly what I thought they contained. I deliver for an Asian eatery in my town. One night, the address led me down a dirt driveway onto an unkempt property, tall grass, no lights, no sign of anyone living there. I called my boss, who yelled at me to knock on the door and not waste the food. I knocked. No answer. Back in my car, I looked up and saw a light had come on upstairs. I went back and knocked again. The door pushed open on the first knock. Someone had unlatched it, but no one was standing there. I called out. My voice echoed through empty rooms. Footsteps never came. Eventually, a voice from upstairs said 2 words in Spanish, "Aquí arriba," up here. At the bottom of the staircase, I looked up. An arm was extended over the ledge at the top, making a stiff come here motion. I walked halfway up. The arm disappeared. At the top, the person had moved into a dark bedroom. All I could see was the arm again, reaching from inside the doorway, repeating the same beckoning gesture. Everything above the elbow was swallowed by darkness. I said firmly that I wasn't going in there and that they could come out with money or I was leaving. The arm withdrew into the black. Then something hit me, hard, fast, thrown from the room. It took a few seconds to register what had struck me and fallen to the floor. A severed human arm. Stiff. Real. I ran down the stairs, food still in hand, out the door into my car. I drove to the nearest neighboring house and rang the bell. When I told the woman what happened, she looked at me in complete confusion. She said no one had lived in that house for years. I worked the late shift at Domino's, 9 to 3 on weekends. Around 2:31 Saturday, I was sent to deliver 2 pizzas to an address on a private dirt road surrounded by trees. A few minutes down the driveway, a bang shook the car. The handling went soft, and a rhythmic flopping told me exactly what had happened. Flat tire. The house was within walking distance, so I grabbed the pizzas and continued on foot. A normal-looking young man answered the door. I told him about the tire. He said he could help and walked back with me to look at it. He went inside for his tools. While he was gone, I wandered a bit further down the driveway and found a spike strip laid across the road. Small, but unmistakable. There was no innocent explanation for it being there. I walked back and told him I hadn't found anything. He said he was going inside for tools. I waited until he reached his front door, got in my car, and reversed down the driveway on the shredded tire, avoiding the strip this time. Looking back down the driveway, I saw him running after my car. I hit the gas, despite knowing the damage it would do to the wheel. I crept home at 10 to 15 miles per hour. Back at the shop, I returned the car sign and told my co-workers the whole story. When it was time to leave, I noticed a car without its lights on following close behind me. I pulled over. The car passed, then pulled to the curb further ahead. I called the police. A cruiser arrived within minutes, and the moment it appeared, the dark car peeled out from its parked position and disappeared down the road. The officer gave chase without a word. I drove home on a destroyed wheel and locked every door behind me. I never found out if they caught the driver. I quit 2 months later. A few years back, I was staying at my girlfriend's father's house for a month. The property sat between a large stretch of woods and a lake, and her dad owned many acres of the surrounding land, including a narrow clearing through the forest that I used as a walking path to clear my head. My girlfriend never joined me on those walks. I always went alone. One day, the fog was unlike anything I'd seen in years, thick enough that I couldn't see 15 feet ahead. I put on my hiking boots and told my girlfriend I'd be back shortly. Walking into the clearing, the fog had turned the woods into something different. The trees were outlines at best, the air was still, and the ground was the only thing I could trust. As long as I stayed in the clearing, I'd find my way back. I thought I heard my footsteps being mirrored, a second set of steps synchronized with mine. I stopped. Silence. I called out hello. No answer. I kept walking. The evening crickets and the crunch of my boots were the only sounds, calming in a way. Then I heard a moaning noise, like an old man breathing through pain. It came from somewhere ahead. Someone sounded hurt. I walked toward the sound, calling out again. Through the fog, I could just barely make out the presence of a figure. Tall, standing still, far enough away that details were impossible. I crept closer, asking if they needed help, but the figure didn't seem to get any nearer no matter how many steps I took. I yelled this time. The moaning stopped. 2 more big steps forward, and I finally understood. The distance between us was not closing. No matter how far I walked, the figure stayed the same distance away. I turned around and started walking back toward the house. 5 seconds later, I looked over my shoulder. The figure was behind me now, maintaining the same gap. I started running. Every time I looked back, it was there, same distance, same height, hovering. I used that word deliberately because at some point I noticed I could no longer see the lower portion of its body. The legs were simply gone. It looked like something floating through the fog. I broke out of the tree line into the yard. One last look at the edge of the woods. The figure was standing right at the boundary, motionless, watching. I burst through the back door and slammed it shut, gasping for air. My girlfriend, her father, and her brother all came to see what was wrong. I pointed toward the tree line and told them something had followed me. Her father went outside with me. When I pointed to where I'd last seen it, there was nothing there. He patted my shoulder and told me not to worry. Between the 2 of us and the 2 dogs, nobody was getting in. I laughed. I pretended I wasn't shaken to my core. I've never been back to those woods in fog. While in the process of moving from Staten Island to Manhattan, I was using apps like LetGo to furnish my new apartment. I found a cheap dresser that matched everything I'd already bought. The seller, Jake, responded quickly, and we arranged to meet outside his house at 10:30 that night. He said he worked late shifts and that was the only time he was available. I arrived at 10:15. The fog was so thick I couldn't tell if there were other cars parked on the street. Seconds after I pulled in, the message appeared from JK on LetGo, "You're here." That unsettled me immediately. How had he known the exact moment I arrived? Was he watching from somewhere in the fog? I replied, "Okay," and looked around. The street didn't have normal houses on it, just small buildings I couldn't identify. It was an unusually isolated block for Staten Island. Jake messaged again, "Come on out, the dresser's waiting out back." "Out back where?" I couldn't see anything. I got out and asked where to go, no reply on the app. Instead, a voice started calling from somewhere in the fog. "Over here." I followed it, shouting that I was coming. The voice led me through a narrow alleyway between two buildings and into a small yard. I couldn't tell how large it was. The fog and the darkness limited my visibility to maybe 6 feet. Then the voice stopped. Complete silence, except distant traffic. "Come inside. Your dresser's right in here." The voice was ahead of me, but I couldn't see anyone. I didn't respond. I started backing toward the alleyway. When I turned around, there were people, standing a few feet away, pressed against a wall or fence, completely still. I could see them even through the fog because they were that close. I ran. Through the alley, onto the street, away from the buildings. Behind me, at least 3 sets of footsteps. I didn't go to my truck, no time to get in, start it, and turn around on a dead end. I ran until I saw headlights. 2 police cars eventually came down the road. One picked me up. We went back to the yard. Empty. Both buildings were abandoned storefronts. The back door was wide open. Inside was nothing. No dresser, no furniture, no people. I showed the officers the LetGo conversation. They took the account information. Nothing ever came of the investigation. I know what was going to happen if I walked through that door. I don't need anyone to confirm it. Last Saturday, while writing this, was an intensely foggy day. My family and I are in quarantine in New Jersey. My wife was out shopping. My son was in his room. I was working at my desk when my 6-year-old daughter Veronica came in and said she saw someone in the garden. I went to the window. Through the fog, I could see a figure standing over my garden with their back to the house. I couldn't even tell if it was a man or a woman. That's how dense the fog was. I knocked on the glass. The figure turned its head, then walked slowly across the garden and deeper into the fog until it disappeared. I told Veronica to stay inside and went out. We have a large yard, rural New Jersey, what the kids call the middle of nowhere, and the figure had moved further onto the property. As I got closer to the shed, I heard a rhythmic thumping. The shed came into view, and the person was there, slamming the shed door open and shut over and over. I yelled at them to leave before I called the police. It was a middle-aged woman, disheveled and wild-looking. She said sorry at least 10 times and ran toward the road, vanishing into the fog. That night, after my wife and I turned off the TV and were trying to sleep, the sound came back. The shed door slamming. My wife was shaking me, telling me to go out there. I put on shoes, grabbed a flashlight, and turned on every backyard light. I went outside shouting. The slamming stopped. The shed door was open. Nobody was inside. I locked it and went back in. Veronica came to me crying. "Look out my window," she said. Those words moved through me like ice water. I ran to her room and kept the light off. The woman was standing at Veronica's window trying to open it. I could see her face clearly for the first time, drooping, cracked skin, wiry grey hair, a mouth that suggested something deeply wrong. I screamed at her to leave us alone and called 911. She ran. The police came, radioed other units, and left. 5 days later, the shed door was found open again sometime during the night. No one saw her. No one heard her. I installed new locks and additional cameras the following day. As I write this update, nothing further has happened. But every night before bed, I check every window in the house, starting with Veronica's. And every morning, the first thing I do is look at the shed from the kitchen window. The door has stayed closed. So far.